Christmas night, 1776.
The American Revolution is dying. General George Washington has just 9 days left before his army ceases to exist.
His men are starving, freezing, and deserting by the dozens every single day. The British are celebrating their inevitable victory with wine and roasted meat. And Washington is about to attempt something so dangerous, so absolutely insane, that his own officers think he's lost his mind.
He's going to cross an ice-choked river in the middle of a blizzard,
march 9 miles through a snowstorm in complete darkness,
and attack 1,500 professional soldiers at dawn.
If he fails, America dies with him. If he succeeds, he changes the course of human history.
This is the true story of the most desperate military gamble ever taken,
and how one freezing night in December saved a nation that didn't even exist yet. Let me take you back 6 months. July 1776, Philadelphia. The Declaration of Independence has just been signed.
13 colonies have declared themselves free from British rule.
The ink is barely dry on the parchment,
and everyone celebrating, cheering in the streets, ringing church bells. They think they've won their freedom with words and signatures. They have no idea what's coming,
because 32,000
British and Hessian soldiers are sailing across the Atlantic at that very moment. These aren't farmers with old muskets.
These are the most feared professional soldiers on Earth. The British have crushed rebellions on 3 continents.
They've conquered nations. They've built an empire where the sun never sets.
And now, they're coming to teach these rebellious colonists a lesson in blood. By December, that lesson has been taught. Washington's army, which once numbered 20,000 men, has been reduced to fewer than
3,000. They've been defeated in New York. They've
been chased across New Jersey.
They've been humiliated in battle after battle. Men are deserting. Officers are resigning. Congress has fled Philadelphia in panic.
And the soldiers who remain,
they're not soldiers anymore.
They're ghosts.
Walking skeletons wrapped in rags.
Many don't have shoes.
They wrap their feet in burlap sacks and leave bloody footprints in the snow. They haven't been paid in months. They haven't had a decent meal in weeks. They're so weak from hunger that some collapse during daily roll call.
December 18th, Washington writes to his brother, I think the game is pretty near up. The game.
He's talking about American independence like it's a card game he's losing. Congress has already authorized him to retreat beyond the Susquehanna River,
essentially abandoning the entire mid-Atlantic region to British control.
Many of his officers are quietly discussing surrender terms.
The revolution, this grand experiment in human liberty, is about to end before it ever really began.
But there's another problem, one that makes everything infinitely worse.
December 31st, that's the date circled in red in Washington's mind.
That's the day most of his army's enlistments expire.
On January 1st, 1777,
the majority of his remaining soldiers are legally free to go home, and they will. They'll walk away from this frozen nightmare.
And Washington will be left with almost nothing. He has 9 days to do something, anything.
To convince these men that this cause isn't hopeless.
9 days to win a victory, or watch everything die.
His officers are having quiet
conversations about what happens after the surrender. Where will they go? Will the British hang them for treason?
Can they flee to France? To Spain?
Some are already making plans.
But Washington isn't planning to surrender. He's planning something else entirely. Something that makes his officers question his sanity.
Across the Delaware River, in the New Jersey towns of Trenton and Princeton, are Hessian soldiers. These are German mercenaries hired by the British to fight this war.
About 1,500 of them are garrisoned in Trenton alone,
under the command of Colonel Johan Raw.
These aren't just any soldiers.
Hessians have a reputation. They're disciplined, brutal, and professional.
They've been trained since childhood to fight.
They wear tall brass hats that make them look like giants.
They march in perfect formation.
They never break ranks. European armies fear them, and Washington wants to attack them.
On Christmas night,
in the middle of a nor'easter, by crossing an ice-choked river, in the dark,
with an army of starving, freezing farmers. When his officers hear this plan, they think he's finally cracked under the pressure. It's not strategy.
It's suicide. Consider what he's proposing.
They need to load 1,400 men,
18 cannons, and dozens of horses into boats.
They need to cross the Delaware River,
which is filled with chunks of ice the size of tables. They need to do this at night, in secret, during a blizzard. Then they need to march 9 miles through snow and darkness, without anyone lighting a fire or making noise. Then they need to attack at dawn,
when professional soldiers will be waiting with loaded muskets and artillery. Every single part of this plan requires perfect execution. One mistake, one delay, one soldier lighting a pipe to stay warm,
and the entire operation fails.
but Washington knows something his officers don't.
He knows that if they do nothing, they lose everything anyway.
At least this way, they die fighting. At least this way, there's a chance. On December 23rd, he gives the order.
The crossing will happen on Christmas night.
Let me take you across the river for a moment.
Into Trenton to see what Washington is up against.
Colonel Johann Rule is not worried.
Not even a little bit. He's a 50-year-old veteran who's fought in Wars across Europe. He's seen real armies, real soldiers, real battles. These Americans, they're a joke to him.
Undisciplined rabble playing at war.
His men are housed in the finest buildings in Trenton. They're eating well, they're warm, they have wine, they have rum, they have everything they need. And it's Christmas, so they're celebrating.
Rule himself is at a party, playing cards and drinking wine with the local loyalists who support
The British cause.
Earlier that week,
Washington's
forces had sent small raiding parties across the
river to harass the Hessians. Just minor attacks. A few shots fired, nothing serious.
Rule had complained to his superior officers that these raids were annoying.
His superiors told him not to worry, but if it would make him feel better, he could build some fortifications around the town.
Rule never built those fortifications.
Why would he?
The Americans were beaten. Everyone knew it.
In a few days, their enlistments would expire, and they'd all go home.
The war was essentially over. All that remained was the formal surrender. One of Rule's own officers,
Major Friedrich von Dichau,
had warned him, "The Americans may attack us on Christmas. They might try something desperate." Rule had laughed.
let them come.
"We'll throw them back into the river where they belong." That Christmas evening, while Rule is playing cards,
A local loyalist farmer arrives with a note.
he's heard rumors.
He thinks the Americans might be planning something.
He hands the note to someone at the party to give to Rule.
Rule is winning his card game. He doesn't want to be interrupted.
He takes the note and shoves it into his pocket without reading it. He'll look at it later.
He never does.
PM, Christmas, Day. The sun is setting over the Delaware.
River, the temperature is dropping.
Snow is starting to fall.
And Washington's army is gathering at McConkey's Ferry, 9 miles north of Trenton.
The boats are here.
Big Durham boats, 40 to 60 feet long, normally used to haul iron or down the river.
They're flat-bottomed, designed to carry heavy loads.
Tonight, they'll carry the weight of American independence. The man in charge of the actual crossing is Colonel John Glover.
And this is where the story gets interesting in a way most people don't know.
Glover commands the Marblehead Regiment. These are men from Massachusetts, from the fishing town of Marblehead. They're not soldiers.
They're sailors, fishermen, men who've spent their entire lives on boats.
They know water.
They know ice. They know how to navigate by feel in the dark.
Without these men, the crossing doesn't happen. Period.
As darkness falls, the soldiers begin loading into the boats. They're packed in tight, standing shoulder to shoulder. The boats rock dangerously with each new man who climbs aboard. The horses are terrified, eyes rolling, trying to avoid stepping into the boats.
The cannons have to be balanced perfectly or the boats will capsize. And the ice, God, the ice.
Chunks of ice are flowing down the river like jagged white boulders. Some are small like dinner plates.
Others are massive, the size of wagons. They slam into the boats with loud, splintering cracks.
The men from Marblehead use their oars to push the ice away.
To navigate through the floating maze, the wind picks up. The snow falls harder.
It's not gentle snow, not Christmas card snow. It's an Oriaster, a full blizzard.
Wind and sleet and ice belting horizontally into their faces. Washington stands on the Pennsylvania shore, watching his army cross.
He's 44 years old, 6 foot 3 inches tall,
Sitting on his horse like a statue. He doesn't show fear. He can't. If his men see him afraid, it's over. But he is afraid. He has to be.
because the original plan was to have everyone across the river by midnight.
They need the darkness to march to Trenton without being spotted. They need to attack at dawn when the Hessians are still
Groggy from their Christmas celebrations. Midnight comes and goes. They're not even halfway across. It's AM before the last boat touches the New Jersey shore. They're 3 hours behind schedule.
The attack was supposed to happen at dawn.
Around AM. It's now impossible to reach Trenton in time. Any reasonable commander would call off the attack.
The element of surprise is gone. By the time they reach Trenton, it will be full daylight. The Hessians will see them coming. Washington doesn't call it off.
He divides his force into 2 columns. He'll lead one along the river road. General Nathaniel Greene will lead the other along the inland Pennington Road. They'll converge on
Trenton from 2 directions simultaneously. And then they march.
Imagine it. You're one of these soldiers. You've just crossed an ice-filled river in a blizzard. You're already exhausted.
You're soaking wet, and your wet clothes are starting to freeze solid on your body.
You haven't eaten a real meal in days.
Your feet are wrapped in rags, and every step sends pain shooting up your legs. And now you're being asked to march 9
miles through knee-deep snow.
in the darkness, carrying a musket that weighs 10 pounds, knowing that at the end of this march, you're going to fight professional soldiers who want to kill you.
Men are falling.
Some from exhaustion, some from the cold.
Officers move up and down the column, literally holding men up, pushing them forward. Keep moving. Keep moving.
If you stop, you die. And it's true, if you stop moving in this cold, you will die. Your body will shut down. The cold will take you. The snow is so heavy that men can barely see the person in front of them. The only way to stay on the road is to follow the dark sheets ahead, hoping they know where they're going. Some of the soldiers' muskets are so wet that they won't fire. An officer reports this to Washington. The general's response becomes one of the most famous quotes of the Revolution.
Tell them to use the bayonet.
I am resolved to take Trenton. The bayonet.
He's saying that if their guns don't work,
they'll have to stab the Hessians to death in hand-to-hand combat. This is the level of desperation they're operating under.
But here's what's beautiful about this moment.
What makes it genuinely extraordinary? Not one man turns back. Not one. They could.
They could drop their weapons and disappear into the darkness and the storm. No one would even know. But they don't. They keep marching. The sun should have been up for hours by now, but the storm is so heavy that it's still nearly as dark as night. The two American columns have reached the outskirts of Trenton.
Somehow, impossibly, they've managed to stay undiscovered. The Hessians have posted sentries, of course.
But these sentries are hungover, exhausted from their Christmas celebrations.
They're huddled in doorways, trying to stay out of the wind and snow. They're not expecting an attack.
Why would they?
No army marches in weather like this.
The Americans fix their bayonets. This is it.
This is the moment everything has been building toward. If they fail here, they lose everything.
Their lives, their freedom, their revolution.
Washington gives the signal.
Captain William Washington and Lieutenant James Monroe led a charge down King Street.
The crack of musket fire splits the frozen air.
Suddenly, Hessians are stumbling out of houses,
pulling on their coats, grabbing their weapons.
They're confused, disoriented. Where are these shots coming from? Who's attacking? How many of them are there?
Colonel Wall is woken from sleep. He's still drunk from the night before. He paws on his uniform and rushes outside, trying to understand what's happening.
His officers are shouting contradictory reports. Americans here, Americans there, Americans everywhere. He tries to form his men into battle lines to create the disciplined formations that make European armies so effective. But the streets are chaos.
Soldiers are running in every direction.
Officers are screaming orders that no one can hear over the gunfire and wind.
And then Washington's artillery arrives.
Captain Alexander Hamilton and Captain Thomas
Forrest position their cannons at the head of King Street and Queen Street, the two main roads through Trenton.
They aim down these streets like they're aiming down bowling alleys.
And they open fire. Cannonballs rip through the Hessian formations.
Men are torn apart. Buildings explode.
The Hessians try to return fire with their own artillery.
But the Americans are too fast. Every time the Hessians set up a cannon, American riflemen pick up the gun crews.
The Hessians are professional soldiers, remember?
They've been trained their entire lives for this. They should be able to handle a disorganized attack by amateur rebels. But they can't see.
The snow is too heavy.
They don't know how many Americans there are. It sounds like thousands. Musket fire coming from every direction. Wall tries to lead a counterattack.
He rides his horse directly into the American lines, sword drawn, screaming for his men to follow him.
It's genuinely brave. Stupidly brave. He's shot twice.
He falls from his horse, bleeding into the snow. His men see their commander fall, and something breaks. These supposedly unstoppable professional soldiers start to panic. Some try to fight their way out of town. Some try to surrender. Some just run. Washington's men pour into Trenton like a flood.
House to house, street to street.
The Hessians are trapped.
Some barricade themselves in buildings. The Americans set up cannons and blast the doors open.
Within 90 minutes, it's over. The numbers tell the story. 22 Hessians killed, 83 wounded, 896 captured.
The Americans,
4 wounded.
2 of them froze to death during the march. But not a single American soldier died in combat.
Not one.
It's not just a victory.
It's a miracle.
A complete, total,
impossible victory against professional soldiers who were supposed to be unbeatable.
Washington's men capture massive quantities of supplies, muskets, ammunition, cannons, food, blankets, everything they desperately need.
They capture 6 brass cannons that will be used against the British for the rest of the war. But the real prize isn't the supplies, it's the hope. Word of the victory spreads like wildfire across the colonies.
Newspapers print the story.
People read it and can't believe it. Washington won
The Americans won.
against Hessians.
In a snowstorm, suddenly, men who were about to go home reconsider. Militia members who had been in hiding start to emerge.
Soldiers whose enlistments expire on December.
31st agree to stay for another 6 weeks.
Not all of them, but enough. The revolution, which had been dying, gasps back to life. In a small room in Trenton, Colonel Druhan Rawle is dying.
The 2 musket balls have done too much damage. American doctors try to save him, but it's hopeless. He's bleeding internally.
Washington comes to see him.
It's an extraordinary moment.
The victorious general visiting his defeated enemy.
They speak briefly. Accounts vary about what was said.
But most agree that Washington treats him with respect, as one soldier to another.
Then someone goes through Rawle's pockets and finds it.
The note, the unread warning from the loyalist farmer, the message that might have saved him, and his entire command if he'd only taken 30 seconds
to read it instead of playing cards. Rawle dies that night, December 26th, still in Trenton.
He's buried there. The note becomes part of history, a reminder that arrogance and complacency
can lose was just as surely as cowardice can.
Washington doesn't rest. He can't. The British have garrisons of Princeton and New Brunswick. They'll send overwhelming force to recapture Trenton within days.
On December 30th, he crosses the Delaware again, returning to New Jersey with his army.
On January 2nd, 1777, a large British force under General Charles Cornwallis marches on Trenton.
They expect to crush the Americans once and for all.
Cornwallis is so confident that he tells his officers,
"We've got the old fox trapped now. We'll bag him in the morning." That night, Washington does it again. He leaves his campfires burning, leaves a small force making noise, and marches his entire army around the British flank in darkness.
By dawn, they're behind the British lines,
attacking the garrison at Princeton. Another victory.
Another impossible, unlikely victory. The British abandon their posts
across New Jersey and retreat to New
York for the rest of the winter. Both armies enter winter quarters.
The fighting stops, but everything has changed. Here's what Washington's Delaware crossing actually means.
Beyond the military victory,
it proved that regular people could defeat professional soldiers, that citizens could become warriors, that freedom was worth dying for,
and that people were willing to die for it.
It established Washington as not just a general, but as a leader of almost mythical proportions.
The man who crossed the river in a blizzard and won when winning was impossible. The man who never gave up when giving up was the only rational choice.
It changed British strategy.
They had assumed the Americans were finished.
Now, they had to reconsider everything.
This wasn't going to be a quick suppression of a rebellion. This was going to be a real war, possibly a long one. It inspired the French. French officers had been watching the
American Revolution with interest, but had assumed
it would fail.
Now they saw potential. By 1778, France would officially enter the war on America's side, providing the money, supplies,
and naval power that would ultimately make independence possible.
But more than any of that, it created a story, a narrative.
The story of the desperate crossing, the impossible victory, the moment when everything should have ended but didn't. Humans need stories. We need to believe that the impossible can become possible, that courage matters,
that standing up for what's right
makes a difference, even when the odds are overwhelming. Washington's Delaware crossing is one of those stories. Most of you know this story not from history books, but from a painting.
Emanuel Lutz's Washington Crossing the Delaware.
Painted in 1851.
75 years after the actual event.
That painting is historically inaccurate in almost every way.
The boats are wrong.
The flag didn't exist yet. The river isn't that wide. Washington isn't standing.
He would have been sitting, or he'd have fallen out of the boat.
It's daytime in the painting.
The real crossing happened at night. The ice chunks are too small and too picturesque.
But the painting captures something true anyway.
It captures the desperation, the determination,
the sheer audacity of what these men attempted.
It captures Washington as a leader worth following, even into the jaws of death.
That's why the painting endures, not because it's historically accurate, but because it's emotionally true.
Before I finish, I want to tell you about some of the men who made this possible.
Not the famous generals, but the regular soldiers whose names we'll never know. The fishermen from Marblehead who rowed those boats through ice and darkness. Without them, the crossing doesn't happen. These men, many of whom couldn't read or write, executed one of the most difficult military maneuvers in history perfectly.
They've received almost no credit for it. The soldiers who marched through the blizzard with no shoes,
Leaving bloody footprints in the snow,
who were so cold and exhausted that they had to support each other just to keep walking, who faced professional soldiers with wet muskets and bayonets and somehow won.
Lieutenant James Monroe, future President of the United States, who was shot in the shoulder during the battle and nearly bled to death. A doctor saved his life by clamping the severed artery with his fingers.
Captain Alexander Hamilton,
Who would go on to become the first Secretary of the Treasury, commanding the artillery that broke the Hessian formations. The 2 soldiers who froze to death on the march, whose names we don't even know. They died in the darkness and snow.
and their bodies weren't found until the next day. They gave their lives for a country that didn't exist yet.
For a freedom they would never enjoy. So why does this story still matter? 248 years later.
Because it's a reminder that nations aren't built by perfect
People making perfect decisions,
They're built by desperate people making
impossible choices, and somehow succeeding anyway, because it shows that leadership isn't about having all the answers. Washington didn't know if his plan would work. He knew it probably wouldn't, but he also knew that doing nothing guaranteed failure. So he did something, because it demonstrates
that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things when they
believe in something larger than themselves.
The men who crossed the Delaware weren't heroes when they started. They were cold, hungry, scared farmers who wanted to go home. They became heroes by not going home, by staying, by fighting, by marching through a blizzard when marching seemed
impossible and fighting when fighting seemed suicidal. That's the real miracle of the Delaware crossing. Not that they won the battle, though that's remarkable enough. The miracle is that they tried, that when every rational calculation said to give up, they decided to fight instead.
America is filled with stories like this.
Moments when everything should have
Failed but didn't. When ordinary people did impossible things. When determination and courage
and sheer stubborn refusal to quit changed the course of history. The Delaware crossing is the first and maybe the greatest of these stories. It's the moment when America decided it would rather die free than live enslaved.
and somehow, impossibly, it survived to tell the tale.
On a cold Christmas night in 1776, General George Washington stood on the banks of the Delaware River and made a choice. He could retreat, save what was left of his army, and probably watch American independence die a slow death.
Or he could risk everything on one desperate gamble.
Knowing that failure meant death or capture for him and his men, he chose to cross the river. 2,400 men followed him into boats, into the ice and darkness and snow.
They crossed because he crossed.
They marched because he marched.
They fought because he fought. And they won because giving up was not an option.
That's the legacy of Washington's Delaware crossing. Not just a military victory, but a reminder that courage is contagious.
That one person's refusal to quit can inspire hundreds, thousands, millions to keep fighting for what they believe in.
The revolution didn't end that night.
There would be 5 more years of war, of suffering, of death.
Valley Forge was still ahead. Yorktown was still years away. But the spirit that won American independence was born on that frozen river crossing, when everything seemed lost and a general decided to fight anyway. That's the moment that saved America. Not the victory at Trenton, though that mattered. The moment was when Washington decided to cross. Everything else followed from that one impossible choice.
If you found this story as incredible as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that
change history. These are the stories that make us who we are.
They deserve to be remembered, to be understood, to be passed on to the next generation. Until next time, remember, the impossible only stays impossible until someone decides to do it anyway.